What is this place? One of a kind mini trip around the world. I think people who've lived here for decades in the Washington area don't know about it.
You cut into a hillside and you go by it again and again, on the Beltway, and you don't know it's here.
Just 25 minutes from the White House lies one of Washington's greatest gyms. It's called the National Park Seminary. It's in the Forest Glen section of Silver Spring, and it has a rich history dating back to the 1890s.
A small group of developers started thinking, oh, well, we need to bring people out here to develop the area. So they created a summer resort hotel. The hotel was named Ye Forest Inn, or the Forest Inn, but even so, in 1893, a national economic downturn shut down the hotel. In late 1893, early 1894, a husband and wife team of John and Vesta Cassidy heard about the property. And they were teaching at a school down in Virginia. And they were thinking they'd like to have a school of their own, open their own school. And so they started National Park Seminary, a private school for young women. Women who came to this school were prominent women of fairly well-off families from all over the country. So they wanted the girls to be exposed essentially to the world around them, not just what was in the classroom. Their goal was to create women with a well-rounded, social, interactive, active kind of education. They were influenced by the Columbian Exposition in Chicago in 1893, which was very internationally flavored. And so they were inspired by that to create on the campus different buildings of different architecture. So that's why we have a Japanese pagoda, a Swiss chalet, a Dutch windmill. I always kind of refer to it as maybe the Epcot of Maryland. It's a little bit of the world right here in one spot. And exercise was just as important as the stimulation of the mind, and built a rather grand building just for physical education. Well, in the Roaring 20s, the 1920s were really the golden years of the school. The country was wealthy, and those were, like I said, the best years of the school. There were up to 400 students by that time. But then with the Depression and the crash in 1929, that dramatically affected the school. Well, in the summer of 1942, the Walter Reed Army Medical Center, Army Hospital at that time, was in great need of more space for their wounded soldiers. So they, under the War Powers Act, Walter Reed, or the Army, took the school. So it became the Walter Reed Army Medical Center, Forest Glen Annex, Forest Glen being the neighborhood. This was World War II. They were still active as a rehabilitation center through Korea and Vietnam eras. Their planning in 1972 was, what are we going to do with this place once we leave? They had a couple of options. One was to tear it all down and put in Army housing, which wouldn't be too attractive. And the other thing was to just get rid of the property. So in 1972, the county did a feasibility study that looked at potential reuses for this property. The property sat, it got worse and worse, and as the Army emptied out the buildings, little by little over the years, they became more deteriorated every year. So by the 80s, they were in pretty bad shape with leaking roofs and steam pipes broken and water running down the street. And if they were boarded up, vandals would try to get in. The Maryland Historical Trust, which is the state preservation office, saw, no, we have to protect this property, or we have to at least designate it as historic. So they put it on the National Register, and it became the National Park Seminary Historic District. The whole property, all the historic buildings are part of its own district. The property covers almost 30 buildings, over 17 acres, and about 1/4 or 25% of the property is green space, known as the Glen, which is a wooded ravine.
What put it on the course that it's on now?
Save Our Seminary was formed in 1989, and I think that was the impetus to bring it to what it is today. We were kind of the people who took care of it. We wanted as many of the historic buildings saved as possible and reused. The gymnasium was one of the buildings in the worst condition here. You walked on the floor and it was like it gave way as you were walking through.
What motivates someone to take a disaster and make it something beautiful?
Well, I think it's an appreciation of what it is, that it's unique, that it's worth saving. But you have to be very passionate and dedicated. I think Carl is that.
I see opportunity where other people don't. I mean, I'm a full repurposer of spaces and taking them from, a utilitarian side to a residential side.
I'm standing in the middle of this beautiful condominium, this large open living space. It's hard to believe this was once a power plant.
The power plant where we're sitting here was always a power plant, and it was built to withstand fires. It was built to withstand pressure. The walls are 3 wide thick of brick, for instance. But it was a very open space. Below us currently, there's 2 floors. It was 1 floor with 5 boilers, in essence the size of railroad cars. All of them were in different states of decay. Some of them hadn't been used for 75 years. Here we have 7 different windows. The top semicircle with the beautiful muntins is an original window. And it sits on top of a frame that consists of 6 other openings, and each one of them is different. And you can see that they're well balanced, the door with the window itself. So these windows are insulated, and they are Windsor windows, which are high quality. They have a UV rating, and they also are low E. On the exterior of the window, it's a metal clad, so there's little maintenance. That every window in the space cannot be altered. You can't move the window. You have to build around the openings, which is incredibly difficult. The hurdles, some of them are in place to keep it historically accurate. The Maryland Historical Trust and I form a relationship and a dialogue as to what can and can't be done. So we like to reuse things. It allows you to keep some of the history instead of throwing it out or hiding it. And most of the wood came, frankly, from the practice house, which was all framed and bent and twisted and so forth. So we reclaimed most of that wood. And we've been using it to build planters, put on the backs of the islands, and to build shelves. So if you can imagine a wall where my hand is pointing, out to where about you are, there would be a little door and a room where you would practice your piano or a flute or something along those lines. And you can see there's 1 room, 1 space here, another wall would be here, another one would be here. So along this entire segment of the room, you would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 complete little practice rooms for the girls when they came for their music lessons.
So is this what you found when you came in here? There are 12 rooms?
Yeah, we found a lot of decay. We found no plaster. The plaster had all fallen off. It had been semi-cleaned out. The room was almost unsafe to walk through. But a lot of the framing still existed, and you could see where the rooms actually had been when it was occupied by the girls.
Take us upstairs.
Yeah, sure. At some point, they combined the 2 buildings. We're now moving from the maids' quarters / practice house to where the servants used to live. There's two buildings and they were built at different times, so the floors of the two buildings, the plates don't align. So, we thought that PH5 would be best as a rolling larger unit over the two buildings with a staircase that allowed you to get from floor plate 1 to floor plate 2. You have, beautiful, beautiful angles and roof lines. Again, they're completely different buildings, and you go from the front of the space, which is the living area, dining area, to the bedrooms, and it's like living in two different buildings, and in fact you are.
So what is your reaction to the final product?
Stunned, thrilled. Wow, it's a wow.
I mean, I look at these complexes that I build and I think of Star Trek. I literally think of Star Trek. And this is the USS Enterprise, and we're off on our own, and no one is to help us except ourselves. The challenge is to make it and keep it a maintenance-free building, and to maintain a level of sophistication and creation that stands the test of time.
I think it's a preservation success story, without a doubt. There were days when I thought, oh, there's no way this is going to happen. And then the next day I would say, there's no way it can't happen. It must happen because it's too important, it's too historic, it's so unique architecturally. There's no other place like this. It reflects, Army history, women's education, and living today. It's a well-kept secret that we need to tell.